Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member as well. I want to thank the witnesses for being here to lend your perspective. A few months ago, I was proud to host USDA leaders in Orange County, Virginia, to meet with the Virginia Cattlemen's Association and the Virginia cattle producers, folks I represent who are a vital and integral part of our community. And I know that many cattle producers in our district have been in the cattle industry for generations, and they are proud to share the lessons and the expertise that their families have developed over decades. They have shared how the industry has changed, and frankly, how anti-competitive practices by other entities in the supply chain, specifically larger packers, have stacked the hand against cattle producers and consumers, particularly smaller family farms like those that I represent in Virginia. Producers feel that that as they work sunset to sunup to sundown, consumers feel this at the grocery store, and it is glaringly obvious in the data. So I want to just talk about the data. We know that the cattle producer share of retail value for beef has decreased from 51.5% in 2015 to 36.8% in 2021. Right, that's just a couple years difference. And at the same time, JBS UF Beef Division saw record net revenue up 101% on the previous year. Meat prices are up 13% for consumers over last year, with families struggling to afford a nutritious diet. And at the same time, Tyson saw double-digit increases in profits and sales in the last quarter. Since 1980, 40% of cattle producers have gone out of business, and at the same time, Cargill has reported its biggest profit in its 156-year history, and National Beef's parent company profits more than doubled in the third quarter of 2021. And I want to mention that Mr. Coy Young, who testified in the first portion of today's hearing, spoke about the family farmers that are going out of business. 40.27 family cattle farms per day call it quits. And farmers contemplate taking their lives because the generations of work that went into creating their family farms are slipping out of their fingers. And so I want to talk about what it means. I want to talk about what it means for these family farmers. The Packers and Stockyard Acts, it exists to prevent undue preferences and advantages for any particular person. We also know that there are financing arrangements and alternative marketing arrangements, AMAs, that so many of my colleagues have asked about, that Packers have with feedlots that allow for substantial control over the supply of live cattle. So, Mr. McLennan, you mentioned in your opening testimony that Cargill does finance producer inputs. And I would open the question to anyone else who might want to address it. But Mr. McLennan, beginning with you, does your company help finance any producer inputs such as feed, pen space, or other inputs as part of AMAs or otherwise?
As part, Congresswoman, as part of the AMAs, directly no. And I would add that the AMAs and our cash market participation, which is very strong, over 30%, and it's been referenced several times that these are what the producers want to achieve. But in terms of farmer financing or farmer education relative to regenerative agriculture, we've got something called Beef Up Sustainability to educate farmers and to provide financing alternatives. But so yes is my answer to your question, that we can't be successful without them.
And so these financing agreements, is it your assessment that they do follow the spirit and the intent of the Packers and Stockyards Acts, specifically that a law that exists to prevent undue preference and advantage?
We abide by the law. So if it's embedded in the Packers and Stockyard Act, then we will follow that law. Whether they're embedded in the specific AMAs, I don't have access to that information right now, but we certainly can follow up.
And certainly when it comes to acknowledging, understanding, and abiding the law, I think it's certainly past time for the federal government to look carefully at the anti-competitive behaviors that really are driving the stunning statistics that I mentioned. That's why I introduced the Meat and Poultry Special Investigators Act that was referenced earlier alongside Congresswoman Miller Meeks with our Senate companion, sponsored by Senators Tester and Rounds. This legislation would create an office at USDA titled the Office of Special Investigator for Competition Matters, And to just counter the point that one of our witnesses made earlier, the purpose here is to ensure that the folks who know this industry, USDA, that they are the ones leading the investigations into what's happening. I appreciate the comments related to it's taken care of, it's within Department of Justice, but indeed that is just not good enough to look out for the needs of the farmers and producers back home in Virginia. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.